Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the Cambridge Service Alliance webinar series. Today I have the opportunity to introduce you Benjamin Lucas. He is a visitor researcher at the Cambridge Service Alliance, and today he's going to talk about the small-scale analysis of health service stakeholder networks, some insights from the social media. Over to you, Benjamin.
Let's get straight into it. The agenda for today is pretty straightforward. This is a working paper that I've been working on with some colleagues who are listed there and in the paper, and we're basically focused on trying to extract some nice insights from social media data to help out not-for-profit health services. We're focused here on the context of mental health service providers. The agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to talk through 10 main sections. So the first is, what are we doing with this project? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? A bit about the data collection and the methods we've used. Straight from the paper, so the sections Node Meta Information Assessment and Pairwise Network Analysis. Then we'll look at the networks themselves with some visualizations and talk about what we can learn from those. We'll then start to wrap up with some key outcomes from the study, talk a bit about some future research directions, and then at the end we'll have some time for questions if there are any. So the first point to cover, what are we doing with this research? Quick overview. The focus here is on highlighting the importance of stakeholder networks in the context of mental health not-for-profit services. We've collected data from the social media brand pages, Facebook specifically, for 3 organizations, one from the US, one from the UK, and one from Australia. We're looking to assess the differences in the way each of these organizations manages their stakeholder networks, and we're interested in highlighting the important nodes within these networks and looking into also the structural properties of each of these networks. So who's connected to who, what sort of clusters are emerging, this sort of thing. Why are we doing this? Well, we're interested in this study to help organizations understand the structural properties of their immediate network, so their immediate connections on social media, to help with social media marketing development. We're interested in helping organizations understand how similar partner and competing organizations structure their social media networks and hopefully being able to learn from those networks as well. We want to be able to help organizations to evaluate how embedded different campaign partners are within the broader network. So we might be working with a specific stakeholder or a specific partner for a campaign, but are there opportunities to also make connections with other connections in our network? We're also wanting to help organizations identify opportunities for future campaigns, ways they might be able to go about building awareness for their causes, perhaps lobbying activities or donation seeking, this type of thing. We're interested in these opportunities both within their present network, okay, so the immediate network that we're looking at, and also what we can learn, as I said, from the activities of other organizations, so drawing comparisons between the networks as well. When we're talking about stakeholders in this context, we're talking mainly, so this is mainly what we saw in the networks that we extracted from social media, different stakeholders, some charities, other not-for-profit organizations, celebrities and politicians who are sometimes involved with fundraising or campaigning for these organizations, and indeed for-profit companies as well. We saw some of those in there. And we'll see some examples of each of these once we move to the network visualizations themselves. Why are we doing this research? First and foremost, mental health is a big issue as far as requiring government funding, requiring organizations and groups to be set up to help boost awareness for some of these issues. We're focused on Facebook as our platform context, as it's by far the most widely used, particularly when we're talking about consumers connecting with organizations. The Facebook platform has now 1.59 billion monthly active users, 1.44 billion of those are on mobile. And perhaps the most important point here, we're interested in the not-for-profit sector in helping not-for-profit organizations achieve cost effectiveness in the way they develop their campaigns, in the way they build awareness, in the way they get their message out there and get donations, get their activities up and running, get their activities promoted, this sort of thing. And a part of that, an important part of that, is building strong and relevant stakeholder relationships to ensure that this happens smoothly and in a cost-effective manner. How are we doing it? Fundamentally, our analysis in this project is quite simple. So this is a nice and simple diagram to explain in very basic terms what we're doing. So let's say we're page A, so the seed node or the seed page, if you like. We're then simply looking at what pages is this page on Facebook connected to. So here we've got page B, page C, page D. Okay, so these might be other pages that this page likes. We've simply followed that link, and then we've built an edge in our graph to represent that connection. We can have these connections being unilateral, so in the case of A to B and A to C, or bilateral. So this means that the page reciprocates and actually likes the seed page back as well, as in the case with A to D. The organizations we've started with for our analysis and our data collection, I should say, or the seed nodes, Mental Health America in the US, of course, Beyond Blue in Australia, and Mind in the UK. So these are organizations that focus their efforts on promoting mental health awareness, promoting causes around getting donations for mental health, promoting new mental health initiatives, helping with the rollout of government mental health initiatives, this sort of thing. Now a bit of detail on the data collection and method we used here. So it's broken down into three main parts, which I'll talk through on the next few slides. So these are the data collection and graph generation, some basic analysis that we did to get the insights that we're talking about here today and in the paper. And the third stage, assessing the networks and of course visualizing the networks. So the first step, data collection and graph generation. For our data collection, we use an existing API application called NetViz, and the citation is at the end of the slides and also in the paper. It's a fantastic tool and it's free and very easy to use. There are of course other tools to connect with the various social media APIs, but for our purposes in this project, NetViz was fantastic. We generated all the graphs in Gephi, which is another fantastic free tool. The second stage, so some basic analysis that we ran. We were mainly interested in looking at some basic topology measures. So we looked at degree centrality plus in and out degree, eigenvector centrality. We ran some community detection using modularity. We also ran some minimum spanning trees. We did all that in Gephi, and I'll talk a little bit about what each of these means and what we get out of them in the coming slides. The third and final stage was our assessment and visualization stage. Here we ran some basic pairwise graph comparison in GraphCrunch 2, and we did all the visualization for this project in Gephi. So a bit about the topology measures and what we're looking at in our networks, just in really basic terms. The first thing is in degree and out degree. So these are simply in the term, in the context of a directed graph, we're talking about inbound and outbound connections. So in our case, it's Facebook page A likes Facebook page B, that kind of thing. Degree centrality is the number of connections. Weighted centrality is adding weight to that. So looking at ranking a node based on the importance, if you like, of its connections and the importance of all its subsequent connections. We used in this paper eigenvector centrality, which we describe in detail in the paper. For community detection, so basically looking to extract some clusters or some subgraph groupings within the networks, we use modularity. So before we dive into the network visualizations themselves, this is straight from the paper. We conducted a basic node meta information assessment. So basically what we did here was took the page likes for each of the pages within the networks derived from the 3 seed pages. We've ordered them based on likes. That's our meta information. It's information embedded within the nodes in the networks. And then we're basically comparing that to some of these simple topology measures. So along the top, For Mental Health America, we have Demi Lovato, so a celebrity page with quite a large like count or external audience count. Mind from the UK, so we had Zoella was #1 on this rank, so she's a popular YouTube blogger in the UK. In Australia, for Beyond Blue, we had the software company Norton, okay, with quite a large external audience. What we're doing here is we're then wanting to look, okay, we have these nodes, we know what their external audience is like, but now we want to see to what extent they actually embed within the broader network that we're looking at. So in the case of Zoella, if we use that as an example from the UK, we can see that Zoella, so her node in the network, has an in-degree count of 2. So there are 2 inbound connections or 2 pages that like her page in the network, but no outbound connections. So none of those have been reciprocated. We can then compare this with, say, Are You OK Day? So another mental health initiative in Australia in the Beyond Blue Australia graph, where it's got maybe a slightly better result. So it has a few inbound and outbound connections, so perhaps a little bit better embedded. We're then also able to, we've got the total number of connections there, so degree, and we can also look at the weight of those connections. As a footnote, these first columns, likes, in degree, out degree, and degree are a count. Eigenvector centrality, though, has a maximum possible value of 1. So that's why it's different. We can also see the original seed pages themselves in the networks here. So again, looking at Mind from the UK as an example, we have out degree of 100. So there was 101 nodes in this network, including Mind itself, and then it's connected to the other 100 nodes. So that's our outbound connection there, and still a lot of inbound connections, which is nice as well. So that's good to see. The next piece of really simple analysis we looked at, so we ran this in the GraphCrunch software, is the Pairwise network analysis. And here we're basically looking to compare in a really basic way how similar the networks are to each other, but how similar they also are to every other network that we have. We do that, it's really, really simple stuff. We're just looking at the correlations in the degree distribution between the networks to see how strong they are, basically. And then we're also wanting to keep this path difference score nice and low. So for the full networks, these are fairly standard social network type networks. So they're a scale-free type network. So we look at the Spearman correlation for the degree distribution. So the how the number of connections are shared across the number of nodes we have in the network. We can see that that's quite high for all 3. For the MST, minimum spanning tree graphs, they're more of a geometric type network. So we look at the Pearson correlation, and again, that's really, really high. So we've got a quick snapshot. This is basically intended in this project more as some basic descriptives to get a feel for how similar the networks are to each other. And we have an extended rundown on that in the paper. Before we look at the visualizations, just some extra notes to make it clear for everybody. The way the networks that we'll look at are visualized here. So the full networks, we've sized our nodes by eigenvector centrality. So that's our weighted topology or centrality measure. So essentially, nodes are bigger if they have important connections, and then if their subsequent connections are also important. The node color corresponds with modularity class, which comes from our community detection procedure. So basically, you'll see some nice clusters in the graphs that sort of look like they're showing density, but they're showing basically when we have subsections in the network that have more connections within that subsection than to other subsections within the graph. The edge color is mixed, so it will just show a mixture depending on whether the connections are inbound or outbound. It'll show a mixture of the colors between the clusters, just for clarity. And edge directionality, as I've discussed, the arrows indicate the direction of the like. So page A likes page B, and then if page B likes page A back, then there's also a bidirectional connection as well. So the first visualization is for Mental Health America. So we can see the seed node for the main page in the middle there in blue. And then we can see we have different clusters, and we've colored those accordingly. If we zoom in on those, and if anybody's interested, it's possible to send out the high resolution SVGs for these as well, if anybody would like to have a closer look, but I'll just go through a few things I'd like to focus on with these today. So if we look at this first cluster, it was quite interesting here that Mental Health America had a lot of the sub-branches of its organization for different locations in the US, all connected to one another, forming the basis of this green cluster. Moving down below that to the purple cluster that we had Mental Health Association, so presumably related to the Mental Health America initiative as well, closely connected to the above cluster, but then also with a lot of connections within its cluster there. The next visualization is for Beyond Blue, so the equivalent organization in Australia. We can see the seed node there in green to the left, Beyond Blue. And we then had the most interesting thing here was this big red cluster that we have over to the right, where we had a lot of interconnections between different kinds of mental health organizations in Australia. So comparing between the two, it's interesting that the US had all these sub-branches of the one organization in different geographic locations, maybe reflective of probably the bigger population in the United States than in Australia. But then interestingly, the Australian organization's gone with this different approach of having all these connections to all these different brands or different organizations for different focused mental health causes. Then finally, the Mind UK visualization. So this one was a bit smaller, so they had less things that they connected with through their Facebook page when we did the data collection. So you can see these fairly clearly without zooming in. So we had some connections to other causes relating both to mental health, but also some other health issues, which was quite interesting to look at. And we go into some discussion in the paper about some of the substructures and some of the groupings we're seeing there. But if we quickly change the visualization over to look at the meta information or the page like count, that's quite interesting as well. So we'll take away the other labels also, so that's a bit clearer. And we can see what we've done here is then changed the coloring or the highlighting based on this node meta information. So based on these like counts for the pages in the network. We had Odeon Cinemas, Zoella, and Macmillan Cancer Support had by far the highest external audiences, so they're in red there. But we're then able to see, okay, to what extent are they very embedded in the network. And we talked before about the Zoella example, where we can see the two pages, so one being Mind, the seed page that likes her page, and another node here, but that's not reciprocated. You can see for Odeon Cinemas, though, for example, that is a reciprocal connection because it goes both ways. We can then compare that with other nodes in the graph that maybe don't have large external audiences, but are better embedded. So the hardest hit over here, so another not-for-profit in the UK, has a number of bilateral connections as well as some other unilateral connections within the network, even though it didn't have a big external audience. So this then allows us to look into what nodes we have that have large external audiences, what nodes we have that have smaller external audiences, and to what extent are we working with them, to what extent are we encouraging them to reciprocate their connections on social media or show some more connection with our organization in some way, and what opportunities are there to embed them or connect them with other partners or other organizations within this network to maybe develop a better campaign or a better social media marketing strategy in the future. For the minimum spanning tree networks, some just quick notes before we look at those. We have node size, so the size of the nodes it corresponds with degree centrality, so just the number of connections, as too does the color. The edge color is again mixed, and the directionality also indicates the direction of the like as per usual. But what we've done with the minimum spanning tree procedure, as you can work out, is take out a lot of edges from the main graphs. So what minimum spanning tree does is basically looks for the shortest path through the network to connect all the nodes once. So it's a sort of path of least resistance, if you like. That allows us to then paint a picture of what hubs we have within the graph. And it's quite interesting to see the way that the centrality changes when we take out all those additional edges, and how we can locate some hub nodes when we run this procedure. So we were talking about how the different branches of the mental health organization itself, so the location-specific nodes were connected to a lot of other location-specific nodes. We can actually get a picture for their role in holding together the entire network. It also allows us to look for faster lines or shorter paths of communication. So if we were talking along the lines of how do we connect these partners for a campaign, or how do we make the process of them connecting more efficient, this gives us a snapshot of that as well. Just quickly, we have the same for the other two networks. So this one was for Australia, so for Beyond Blue, and interestingly, that seed node gets pushed out to the periphery. And the Shed, which is an organization for promoting the mental health and well-being of older males, actually becomes quite central. So it had a lot of first-degree connections, which had a lot of subsequent connections, which put it in the position of becoming a hub node in this particular network. And last but not least, the Mind UK minimum spanning tree graph. We had the time to change, so another not-for-profit organization became the hub node here. We could see the original seed node pushed out to the periphery as well. So some key outcomes wrapping up now from this project. First and foremost, everything we've done here is very easy and very cost effective to implement on an ad hoc or an ongoing basis. So it's all been done with software that is freely available, and we've very deliberately kept things fairly simple, and we hope practically relevant and intuitive. Another big thing we've done is identified how organizations structure their social networks and how we can use this information as a proxy for how they manage their campaigns and stakeholder relationships. And we said at the start about how we could maybe look for opportunities to use this information to inform how we connect with our own campaign partners or our own stakeholders. We pointed out some opportunities, or we pointed out some ways in which we could use the analysis we've presented here to look for opportunities to find ways to better embed partners within our networks and running quick comparisons of external audience size so that the page likes relative to their centrality or connections and reciprocal connections in the network. And in the MST phase, we did some quick analysis around looking at identifying hubs and fast lines of communication through the network. Again, reinforcing this idea of how do we build better relationships, better connectivity between partners for better campaigns and better social media marketing down the line. Future research, so there's a few possibilities arising from this project. The first would be to extend the networks, either looking at extra degrees of connections or multi-seeding, which I've got examples for in just a moment. Moving to the for-profit context, of course, would be another avenue. There are quite a number of brands that we've looked at actually in the for-profit space that make use of Facebook to connect with stakeholders and other organizations in a similar way. Looking at other platforms and indeed combining data from multiple platforms. So Twitter followers, for example, building this into a more formalized dashboard tool would be another possibility. Embedding other metrics in the network. So one other variable we've played around with, one other data point we've played around with has been embedding the talking about this count that Facebook collects also into the networks. So that would work maybe for more a smaller scale or a campaign focused study if we were going to do it in a similar way. And indeed looking at other network data sources. So everything we've done here, again, is fairly straightforward. We could apply it in any other type of network, stakeholder network. We could create that through survey data, for example, or company records, or indeed any other source where we have entities that we can represent as nodes and some way of establishing a connection between them. Very quickly, so this is an example of what I mentioned before. This is a network that we've constructed based on second degree connections. So you can see how already it starts to get a lot bigger. This one was actually in the for-profit context. So we've seeded from APG, a pension fund in the Netherlands here. And then we're able to look at its immediate connections, which are probably more the ones clustered in the middle here, and then clusters that are further out on the periphery of this graph because they have less connections to nodes in the center. Interestingly, the blue one there was Maastricht University, where I'm talking to you from right now. The yellow one there was Cambridge. So these guys were using their Facebook page a lot for recruitment and this type of activity. So they were connecting with a lot of universities. Another possibility was the multi-seeding to create these networks. So here's an example that we've been experimenting with where we've seeded for the networks for the US presidential candidates a few weeks back now. And basically we've seeded from the candidates themselves, the gray nodes, but then where these networks connect together, which was the case with some of the Republican pages, we're able to join those together in the visualization and conduct some nice analysis as well. So those are two possibilities for how we would extend this to be a little more rigorous and detailed down the line. We have some references for those interested, and now if we have some time, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.